Just a few moments ago, President Trump took to Truth Social and accused Iran of using AI to fabricate war footage. Then he went after the media, writing, quote, "The story was knowingly fake, and in a certain way, you can say that those media outlets that generated it should be brought up on charges for treason for the dissemination of false information." We do not know what reporting he is even referencing in this post, but apparently it's treasonous. This comes after Trump allegedly told House Speaker Mike Johnson in a private conversation this week that, quote, "Nobody gives a bleep about housing," unquote, according to Punchbowl News. Johnson reportedly conveyed that message to GOP leadership last week, saying that the president wants to pass his election-related legislation, the Save America Act, instead of a major housing bill. That message comes as a recent Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll shows that nearly 2 in 3 renters don't think they'll be able to buy a home anytime soon. Dean Obeidallah and Max Rose are still with us. Max, the irony here, he says, presumably, he says, nobody gives a bleep about housing. He's a real estate developer. Presumably, he gives a bleep about housing. He just doesn't give a bleep about whether other people can afford housing. And it's really hard for me to understand how this administration still has not grasped that this election is going to be about affordability.
I mean, you're going to soon see the Trump family making shadow bets on Polymarket that the Republicans are going to lose the House and the Senate at this rate. I mean, there's no other justification for why.
Mike Johnson is on Kalshi betting.
Right, exactly. I do think, though, that this is just a prime example of class warfare. He's not saying no one cares about housing. What he's actually saying is there are millions of people in his mind and 100% of his friends that care about the price of their principal asset in their home, and he doesn't want to do anything that he thinks would scare them.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, what we've seen over and over and over again is actually when you build more housing, it doesn't depress the price of housing in the first place, right? So it's you can have your cake and eat it too, to a certain degree, but you certainly could lower the price of rent by building more housing. So but he would scare all his friends here. This is Mar-a-Lago classist politics, and that's what makes this administration scary.
I disagree. I feel weird.
I'm really knocking this out of this.
I feel weird saying this because I kind of see his point. He's saying this because there's a bill pending in the Senate that's a federal bill that would offer subsidies for housing and whatnot. He would rather get the Save America voting ID bill passed instead. If you're a guy bent on authoritarian takeover of the country and minimizing minority voters' participation in the political process, of course you would want that to go first. It makes perfect sense.
But the idea, though, first of all, no one cares about housing because they all care about his ballroom. They all care about renaming the Kennedy Center.
Because he has an edifice complex.
This is less.
I love these puns.
I'm telling you, this is less like a president and more like a bucket list that we're going through with Donald Trump, rename the Kennedy Center after myself. And so now the SAVE Act has nothing to do with voter ID. It has everything to do with vote rigging, right? So that's your point. Yes. Absolutely. If they just wanted a standalone voter ID law, that would be very interesting. That would put Democrats in a tough position. This law is filled with horrible things, from purges to ending mail-in voting to the idea of birth certificates that show and women being disenfranchised. Yes. So he knows it. So, but I think housing, he's missing the boat. It's about affordability. Housing is a buzzword that's attributed to affordability.
But you don't have to cater to the American public if you can just rule out them voting in the first place.
Yeah, it's true, but it's also why he didn't make the case to us about the Iran war, because we are subjects. Yeah. We're not constituents. He honestly believes he's a king. Why come to the serfs and the subjects to sell a war when I can just dictate it? He hates democracy. The guy attempted a coup and incited the January 6th terrorist attack. We all saw it. This man is the enemy of democracy, and I wish more of our fellow Americans would have all gotten that. He would not be in the White House.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying in the last block, too, of, the polling that he's getting on the war, sort of 90-10. That's just his supporters. I'm not even sure that when it's presented by aides to him, they're making clear that that's just the MAGA base. But that's the universe in which he lives. Those are kind of the only people, it seems, the president thinks he is actually serving. Right. So he may well be speaking the truth when he says people don't care, because they do seem to start to care about whatever he says they are supposed to care about in the moment. And so in a way, he is speaking the truth, and you're both right at the same time.
We're all right. Look, affordability, this is when I talk to Democratic members of Congress from around the country, the sleeper issue they've been raising for years, because I would say, is there an issue the media is not covering that people raised to you at town halls? Housing, over and over, all over the country. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even think of that. And now when I just interviewed Governor Hochul last week,
here in New York, it was like the entire thing of the last year.
So Governor Hochul is embracing it and making one of the big issues for this re-election campaign. Governor Sherrill in New Jersey, as a candidate, made housing a big issue. Where you see people are struggling, they're afraid to lose where they can live, they can't afford it, rent's going up, and seniors especially are fearful that as prices go up, they're going to be priced out. They don't know where they're going to live. This is a very real issue. Trump doesn't care. He cares about Trump. That's who he is. He doesn't care about the rest of us at all. He cares about one person, Donald Trump.
And he doesn't certainly care about the farmers who are part of his base. And there was the head of the Farm Bureau, the American Farm Bureau, who's warning that Trump's war with Iran could cause supply shortages. We've talked about it on the show, not just in terms of like the oil shortages, but with the oil shortages and other things that are needed, fertilizer, all that stuff. And the president tonight on Air Force One saying he doesn't know if he wants to make a deal with Iran. And so you're thinking of like the base of the Republican Party, the coalition that he built, including farmers, who are being hurt after a year of being hurt by tariffs, livestock in Argentina. Now they're dealing with the Iran war. And the president's unable to speak to that. And the only messaging coming out of the administration is toughen up, just bite the bullet. And
the sacrifice is worth it.
The sacrifice is worth it. Freedom is not free.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that's been misconstrued about the critique of this war is, yes, there's a critique of the decision in and of itself, but also a critique of the decision-making process, how fast they ran into it without any justification, because they have caught themselves here in a lose-lose situation from just a game theory standpoint, right? You either stay in it because you're afraid to look like a loser. This is what happened to us in Afghanistan for so long. Or, right, you withdraw, and then you think,
nothing changes.
My God, nothing changes, or my enemy thinks we're weak, or there's all these voices in your head but why you should stay in this, right? They did not think about this quagmire. They didn't think about what happens if the war lasts longer than a day. What happens if it isn't like the Maduro raid, and it's not just easy, or at least perceived as easy. And so we're seeing these second and third order consequences, like oil prices go up, like food prices go up. And this is why we should be opposing this relentless march to forever wars, particularly without constitutional approval.
Well, on that point, hearing from our team that Trump, who's on Air Force One, just said that on Cuba, he thinks something is going to happen with Cuba pretty quickly. We are either going to make a deal or do what we have to do very soon. When you hear that, what do you hear, Max?
This guy's out of his mind. I mean, first of all, we're showing the country, the world, a little bit that no military has unlimited power. None. Especially when you just race into a forever war without any preparation. We're hearing reports about munition stockpiles issues. We're hearing reports about moving air defenses from South Korea to the Middle East. We have bases that are getting destroyed throughout the entire region. We moved all of our naval power from Latin America off the coast of Venezuela to the Middle East, and we extended their deployments 2 and 3 times already. So unfortunately, I'm not even sure if that's a military option at this point with everything that has happened. But even more than that, how in God's green earth could this guy be thinking that this is actually politically popular and this is why anyone sent him to the Oval Office? He ran against forever wars.
Well,
he ran on affordability.
Of Cuba may be a little bit different. I don't know if you agree or not. But
again, if you're being shown polls of just the Cuban-American diaspora community, it's going to be let's do it for the most part.
Isn't it perfect sense?
As it is with the Iranian diaspora,
right.
probably.
Right. Although there are also sizable, in both communities, sizable parts of the diaspora that are not in support of this. But I am not sure that your average American.
No, I just mean that, like, in the Florida electorate, where there has been so much attention by the Republican Party on Florida over the years. I mean, Florida is like pretty red now. It was purple. It was a swing state.
You're right about that.
And so for a while, I think it was Republicans were really catering to that Cuban exile community who really wanted
and they're
a
very
much more
politically powerful. Our colleague Alex Tabbitt was just there talking to a lot of them, and they're ready for it.
Yeah, so I don't mean the whole population. I mean like that particular constituency.
I know we can speak a lot about this at greater length, but I'm wondering, is a potential American military takeover of Cuba fraught like it is in Iran, or more like Venezuela in the sense that it could be potentially a grab-and-go operation. Because the Iran quagmire is obviously not going well.
There's
right now,
little bits of both.
Yeah,
I think it's much more likely to look like the Venezuela operation.
I think it depends on if Pete Hegseth or Marco Rubio is handling it.
And it's Marco Rubio in this case.
Yeah.
And it's good, but I think it is much more likely to look like, if it escalates to that point, like what we saw in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. However, I would say the Cuban regime and Iranian regime have some similarities that maybe aren't present there, like the patria or muerte attitude of like, we will go down sinking with this thing is still very present for some people, not all. There are definitely some people who are back channeling with Rubio and others right now. But this like absolute back against the wall thing is present. The Cuban military punches above its weight. Cuban spies punch well above their weight. They're a bit more of a formidable adversary than people do. We were talking last night about the perils of underestimating your enemy. When you think your enemy is lesser than you and dumber than you and has fewer resources than you, you can often end up in a really bad asymmetrical warfare type situation.
Right.
And so there are definitely risks there, but I do think it leans more toward looking like the operation in Venezuela.
It's lucky we have a mad king, so we're fine.